John had never expected his quiet life to change in a single night. He lived on the outskirts of a small city, in a modest house surrounded by old oak trees. The streets were usually empty at this hour, and the only sounds were the wind brushing against the leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. That night, though, a sound cut through the calm, a soft, trembling cry, almost like a child's sob. Curiosity tugged at him. John had always been a careful man, retired now, cautious after decades of work as an engineer. Still, the sound was urgent, desperate. He followed it, moving slowly, keeping his eyes on the shadows. At first, he thought it might be a lost animal, maybe a dog. But as he stepped closer to the edge of a dimly lit alley, he saw something he could never have imagined. There, huddled behind a dumpster, was a small being. It was not human, not exactly, but its size was like a child's. Its skin was pale and smooth, almost glowing faintly in the dim light. Its eyes were enormous, black and round, reflecting the little streetlight above. They were full of fear, wide and unblinking, and they held a depth of emotion that instantly tugged at John's heart. The being shivered violently. "Please, help me," it whispered in broken English, a voice so fragile it sounded like it might shatter. John froze. His first instinct was caution, his second fear, but there was something in those eyes, something so vulnerable, so innocent, that it overwhelmed every warning in his mind. Slowly, John knelt down, keeping his movements gentle and slow. "Hey, it's okay. I won't hurt you," he said softly. The alien child looked at him, hesitation in its gaze, but the fear in its body seemed to outweigh caution. Then, almost without warning, it ran straight into John's arms, clinging as if his embrace was the only safety in the universe. John felt a rush of protectiveness he hadn't known he was capable of. The child's small body trembled against his chest, tiny hands gripping his shirt like it was a lifeline. His mind raced with questions. Where had this being come from? What was it? And most importantly, why was it here alone in the middle of the night, terrified? The child spoke again, a soft, broken whisper. They want me. Take me. Its words were jagged, incomplete, but the fear in them was unmistakable. John's heart sank. Someone or something was hunting this child, and if John didn't act, it would not survive. He led the child to his house carefully, avoiding the streets as much as possible. Inside, he set up a small space near the fireplace, using blankets and pillows to make a tiny, safe corner. The child, Lyra, as she later told him her name, curled into the warmth, still trembling. John watched her, realizing that this was no ordinary situation. He was a simple man, retired, living a quiet life, and now he had responsibility for a being unlike any he had ever known. Lyra slowly looked up at him, her big black eyes glistening. She tilted her head, a soft questioning sound escaping her lips. John felt his chest tighten. He didn't understand her fully, and she didn't understand him. Yet a connection was forming, a silent promise that he would protect her, no matter the cost. That night, John sat by the fireplace, listening to the soft crackle of flames while Lyra slept, small and fragile in the corner. His mind was a storm of thoughts, fear, and wonder. The world he knew, quiet, safe, predictable, was gone. In its place was a child from another world seeking shelter, trust, and love. And John knew, deep in his heart, that nothing would ever be the same again. For the first time in years, he felt alive, his heart beating not just for himself, but for another. And as he watched Lyra sleep, he silently vowed that he would do everything in his power to keep her safe, no matter what dangers awaited them outside that small, fragile haven. The next morning, John woke to find Lyra already awake, sitting quietly on the blanket he had set for her. Her huge black eyes followed every movement he made. She looked small, fragile, yet there was a strange intelligence in her gaze. She tried to speak, but only soft, broken words came out. John realized communication would take patience, but he was determined to understand her. Over the following days, John began learning about Lyra's world, She drew pictures with trembling fingers, shapes that glowed faintly as if lit from within. The drawings showed a hidden society, small delicate creatures like her living in tunnels beneath the earth. Their homes were glowing domes filled with light and life, hidden from humans for centuries. Lyra pointed to one drawing and whispered, "Home. Gone hunters." John's heart ached. He could see it clearly. Lyra had fled from her own kind, from something far worse than he could imagine. Every day she became more attached to him, curling up beside him at night, resting her small head on his chest. Her trust was fragile but growing, and he felt a deep responsibility he had never expected. One evening, John tried to comfort her. "You're safe here, Lyra. I won't let anything happen to you," he said. She looked at him for a long time, her tiny hands brushing his, and he felt the weight of her fear pressing into his chest. Her kind had survived in secret for generations, yet she, the youngest, had been forced to run. It was more than he could imagine, and yet he felt a fierce protectiveness. Then the truth began to reveal itself piece by piece. Lyra made a trembling motion with her small hands, showing him sharp mechanical devices in her drawings. She pointed to glowing circles above her tunnels. "Hunters," she said, coming from the sky. John realized that her people were being hunted, not just by humans, but by forces unknown. Someone wanted her kind, and John knew they were fast, powerful, and relentless. John spent hours thinking about what to do. He wasn't a soldier or a hero. He was a man who had fixed engines, calculated circuits, and designed machines. But now he had to protect a child from another world, one who depended on him completely. Every time he looked at Lyra's trembling form, he felt a surge of courage he didn't know he had. This child needed him, and he could not fail. Lyra began to show emotions that went beyond fear. Sometimes she laughed softly at the small things John did, pouring tea too carefully, making strange faces, humming old songs. Other times she became quiet and withdrawn, staring at the ceiling, remembering things John could not yet understand. Her emotions were raw, pure, and human in their depth despite her alien form. One night, while the wind howled outside, Lyra whispered, Alone. No family." John held her tightly, feeling the weight of her sorrow. She was not just an alien child, she was a child at heart, longing for love, for safety, for a place where she could belong. And John realized that the universe had placed her in his care for a reason. He would fight, he would protect, and he would not let the hunters take her. The days turned into weeks, and John became attuned to her needs. He learned her strange habits, the way she flinched at shadows, the way her glowing skin dimmed when she was scared. He taught her small comforts, warm food, blankets, and the sound of calm human voices. Slowly, she began to trust him completely. But John knew that the peace was temporary. Lyra's past, her true world, and the forces chasing her were always lurking just beyond the shadows. And one night, as he listened to the forest outside, he felt it. A low, distant hum, mechanical and deliberate. The hunters were coming closer. John tightened his grip on a small wooden chair, his mind racing. He had a child to protect, a secret world to honor, and a battle he hadn't yet begun. He looked at Lyra, asleep and peaceful for the moment, and whispered, "I promise I'll keep you safe, no matter what." And for the first time he realized that protecting her was not just about survival. It was about standing for something greater than himself. Humanity, courage, empathy, and hope for the innocent, no matter which world they came from. The night air was thick with tension. John and Lyra had grown accustomed to hiding, but tonight felt different. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming closer, something heavy, powerful, and merciless. The forest around his small home whispered with shadows, and every rustle made Lyra flinch. She pressed herself against his side, her small body trembling like a leaf in the wind. John tried to calm her. "It's okay, Lyra, I'm here. Nothing will happen while I'm with you," he whispered. But even his voice trembled. He had faced many challenges in his life. Machines breaking down, projects failing, but nothing had ever scared him like this. This was not about work, not about mistakes. This was about life, survival, and the fragile trust of a child from another world. Suddenly, a strange, low hum echoed through the trees. John's stomach twisted. He froze, listening carefully. The hum grew louder, mechanical, like 1,000 engines combining into one. Lyra's eyes widened, huge and shining with terror. "They coming," she whispered, barely audible. Her voice was trembling, but John understood immediately. Whatever was coming, it was hunting her, and it would not stop. John grabbed her small hand and ran, moving silently through the underbrush. The moonlight barely guided them, but he knew a few hidden paths in the forest. They ran deeper, past thick trees and fallen logs, until they reached a small clearing where an old abandoned cabin stood. John had never thought much of it, but tonight it became their sanctuary. Inside, John barricaded the doors with old furniture, while Lyra curled up in a corner, clutching a blanket to her chest. Her skin glimmered faintly, reflecting her fear, and John felt a deep pang of helplessness. He had to protect her, yet he was just one man. Against unknown hunters with unknown technology, he felt painfully small. Hours passed in tense silence. Outside, faint lights flickered through the trees, searchlights scanning, searching. Mechanical footsteps and whirring sounds echoed in the distance. Lyra's small body shook and she buried her face in John's chest. "I got scared," she whispered. Her words were simple, but the emotion behind them broke him. John sat beside her, wrapping his arms around her. "I know, Lyra, I know. But we'll get through this," he said. He didn't fully believe his own words yet, but he had to show her strength. He had to be her protector, her anchor in a storm that could swallow them both. Suddenly, the sound of metal against wood rang out from outside. Something or someone was at the cabin. Lyra screamed, a sharp, desperate sound that pierced John's heart. He pushed her behind him, shielding her as best he could. The door rattled violently as if it might be torn from its hinges. John's mind raced, searching for a way to defend them. Then he remembered the old hunting rifle leaning against the wall. His hands shook as he picked it up. He had fired guns before long ago, but nothing like this. The intruders were not human. They moved unnaturally, fast and precise. The hum outside intensified, a sign that they were closing in. John looked down at Lyra, her eyes wide with fear. "I will not let them take you," he whispered fiercely. She pressed her small hand into his, trusting him completely. That trust, so fragile, so pure, gave him a surge of courage. For her, he would face the impossible. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, without warning, the cabin shuddered as if a massive weight had struck it. John fired a warning shot, hoping to buy them time. Lyra screamed, holding on to him tightly, and he felt a determination he had never known before. They might be outmatched, outnumbered, and outpowered, but they were not without hope. And in that small, fragile cabin, John made a promise that would define the rest of their lives. He would protect Lyra no matter the cost. No hunter, no alien force, no danger in the universe could take her from him while he still drew breath. The night was far from over. The hunters were near, relentless, and terrifying, but in the darkness a bond had formed that was stronger than fear, a bond of trust, courage, and humanity. And it was this bond that would give them a fighting chance to survive. After the terrifying night, John realized something important. Fear alone would not keep them alive. They needed trust, connection, and courage. Slowly, in the safety of the cabin, he began to understand Lyra, not just as an alien child, but as a being with thoughts, feelings, and memories that mirrored human innocence. Lyra was quiet at first, curling into the blankets he provided. Her tiny hands clutched the fabric tightly, and her big black eyes watched every movement he made. John sat near her, speaking softly, telling stories of his childhood, of small joys and failures, of a world that sometimes seemed ordinary but was filled with simple beauty. At first she only listened, her gaze distant, yet he noticed subtle changes, the way her shoulders relaxed, the faint glow of her skin softening. Days passed. They ate together, shared small tasks, and found comfort in the routines John had created. Lyra tried to mimic his actions, imitating the way he poured tea or tended a small fire. Occasionally, she would make a small laugh, a delicate sound that made John's chest tighten with emotion. It was the purest form of joy, untouched by fear or cruelty. One evening, under the faint moonlight through the cabin window, Lyra handed John a small piece of paper. She had drawn it herself, a delicate sketch of her family. Tiny figures with glowing wings, smiling faces, and a world bathed in soft, shimmering light. She pointed to the drawings, then to herself, and whispered, "I lost alone." John's heart sank. The child he had been protecting was carrying grief far heavier than anyone her age should bear. He kneeled beside her, gently taking her small hands in his. "I know, Lyra," he said softly. "I don't know what happened there, but you're not alone anymore. I'm here." Her eyes glistened with tears, and she leaned into him, small and vulnerable. In that moment, John realized that this bond, this fragile connection, was more than protection. It was hope, the kind that could endure even the darkest nights. Over the next few days, John learned more about Lyra's people. Through gestures, pictures, and her broken words, he understood that her species had been hidden on Earth for generations. They were small, delicate, and peaceful, surviving quietly beneath human civilization. But some among them had sought power, creating experiments and weapons that drew enemies from across the stars. Lyra, innocent and pure, had refused to follow the path of cruelty, and that had made her a target. John felt a surge of determination he had never known. He had faced dangers before, storms, accidents, failing projects, but nothing had ever mattered like this. This child, so small and fragile, needed him in a way no one else ever had. Her trust was absolute, and he could not betray it. One night, as the wind whispered through the trees outside, John noticed Lyra staring at the ceiling, deep in thought. "You think I must hurt?" she asked quietly. The question struck him deeply. She feared she might be forced to do harm, even though she had never done wrong. John gently shook his head. "No, Lyra, you don't have to hurt anyone. You're good, and you're safe with me. Always." She looked at him, a mixture of fear and hope in her eyes, and slowly nodded. For the first time, John felt that she truly believed him. The bond between them had grown stronger, deeper and unbreakable. But outside, the threat was still there. John knew the hunters would return. He didn't know when, but he could feel it. The air was heavier, the forest quieter, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Still in that small cabin, surrounded by blankets, warmth, and trust, John and Lyra found a fleeting sense of peace. And John realized something he had never understood before. Sometimes courage is not about fighting alone. It's about connection, about standing together, and about protecting someone fragile in a world that seems determined to destroy them. Humanity, he thought, could be defined by that single act: the courage to care, the courage to love, and the courage to fight for the innocent. No matter the odds, in that quiet moment, he held Lyra close and promised silently, "I will not let them take you. I swear it." And for the first time since the hunters had appeared, John felt a flicker of hope. Bright, fragile, and unstoppable. The next morning, the forest was quiet, almost too quiet. John sat with Lyra near the small fire, watching her pick at a piece of bread. Her glowing skin seemed dimmer than usual, and her eyes were distant, lost in memories he couldn't reach. Yet he knew something had changed. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. I tell truth," she said, trembling. John leaned closer, sensing the weight of her words. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew it would be important. Lyra took a deep breath, small hands shaking as she gestured toward the fire, then at him. Her words were halting, fragmented, but John understood the meaning slowly. Our kind, experimented. Humans, she said. John froze. His mind struggled to comprehend. "You, what?" he asked, voice shaking. Her large eyes filled with tears. We scared. We hurt. Some leaders wanted survive. But I ran, not hurt humans. I promise. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly, her glowing body flickering with emotion. John's chest ached. He had imagined threats from outside, hunters, unknown forces, but never this. Lyra's innocence had been shaped in a world of fear, and now he realized why she had fled. She had refused cruelty that her own kind had demanded, and that act of courage had made her a target. He reached out, gently lifting her hands from her face. "Lyra, look at me," he said softly. She met his gaze, tear-streaked but determined. "I believe you," he whispered. "You're not guilty. You didn't do anything wrong." She shook her head, small sobs escaping her. "They got leaders. They want me to hurt. I cannot." "I run," she said. The fear, sorrow, and guilt in her voice hit John like a hammer. This child, so young, so fragile, had survived horrors most humans could never imagine, and yet she carried the weight of her people's sins on her small shoulders. John hugged her tightly, feeling her trembling against him. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "I'll protect you. No one can take you from me. You're safe now, Lyra." She clung to him, small and fragile, yet there was a spark of hope in her gaze. He felt it too. Their bond, their connection was stronger than fear, stronger than any hunter or threat. The truth weighed on him like a stone. Humanity had often been judged by strength, power, and conquest, but here was an innocent child from another world, fleeing a war she never chose, seeking nothing but protection and love. John realized that strength could also mean empathy, courage, and the choice to protect the innocent no matter the cost. Lyra finally whispered, Afraid they take me away." John felt a surge of anger and determination. He would not let that happen. He could not. She had trusted him, and that trust was sacred. Whoever or whatever came for her would have to face him first. Hours passed as they sat together, the fire casting warm light over their small corner of the world. Outside, the forest was still, but John knew it was only temporary. The hunters were relentless. They had tracked Lyra before, and they would try again. But for now, in that fragile, quiet moment, they had peace. John looked at her tiny, glowing form and whispered, "No one can take you from me, Lyra. You are not alone. You never will be." She nestled closer, exhausted but trusting him completely. For the first time, John realized the full weight of their situation. He was not just protecting a child from danger, he was preserving hope, innocence, and the chance for goodness to survive in a universe that too often rewarded cruelty. And in that knowledge he found a courage that went beyond fear, beyond reason, beyond anything he had known before. Lyra closed her eyes, resting her head on his chest, and John held her tightly. Together they faced an uncertain world, but they faced it as one, bound by trust, empathy, and an unbreakable bond that even the darkest forces could not sever. The night was dark and cold, the forest around the cabin heavy with silence. John could feel it in his bones. The hunters were coming back. Their hum, faint but unmistakable, drifted through the trees like a warning. Lyra huddled close to him, trembling, her small hands clutching his shirt as if it were a lifeline. John knew he had to act. He couldn't let them take her, not after everything. Every instinct screamed that he was no match for their speed, their weapons, or their unknown technology. Yet looking at Lyra's frightened face, he felt a surge of determination stronger than fear. She was not just an alien child, she was life itself, fragile but precious, and he could not fail her. "We need to go," he whispered softly. "But you need to hide. I'll slow them down." Lyra's eyes widened, black pupils filled with panic. "No, John, don't," she cried, her small voice cracking, but he shook his head firmly, taking her tiny hands and pressing them to his chest. "You have to trust me, Lyra. I will keep you safe even if it means I stay behind." With a nod of fear and trust, she ran toward the small cave he had discovered earlier, hidden behind thick brush. Her glowing form dimmed with worry, but she moved quickly, disappearing from sight. John stayed behind, stepping into the open just as the faint hum grew louder, and the lights of the hunters flickered through the trees. The first figure emerged, a sleek, mechanical silhouette faster than human eyes could track. John's heart pounded, but he held his ground, raising an old rifle he had salvaged. He fired a warning shot, hoping to draw attention to himself and away from Lyra. The hunters paused, confused for a moment. Buying precious seconds, more followed. A wave of mechanical precision and alien strength. John dodged, ran, and fired again, each shot meant to distract, not to destroy. He could feel the energy beams whizzing past him, shattering trees and igniting small fires. His chest burned with adrenaline and fear, but he thought only of Lyra hiding in the dark, unaware that he was risking everything for her. Minutes felt like hours. Every shot, every movement was a gamble. John's arms ached, his body screamed, but he didn't stop. He had made a promise to protect her, and promises, he knew, were stronger than fear. Finally, he saw a shadow move in the corner of his eye. Lyra had reached the cave. She peeked out, her glowing eyes wide, and whispered, "Go, John, go." Her trust in him, so pure and unwavering, strengthened his resolve. He waved one last time, then turned back to face the hunters. They advanced, relentless, their voices metallic and harsh. John fired one last round, then ran deeper into the forest, leading them away from Lyra. Every step, every breath was heavy, but he kept moving, pushing the hunters farther from her hiding place. Hours passed. Exhausted, bleeding, and bruised, John finally collapsed in a small clearing. He could hear the distant hum of the hunters fading, and a tiny spark of hope flickered. Lyra was safe for now. But the cost of that safety weighed heavily on him. He had risked everything for a child not even of his world. Later, in the quiet aftermath, John thought of Lyra sleeping safely in the cave. The fear, the terror, the unknown, they all paled next to the bond they had formed. He realized that love, courage, and selflessness could transcend worlds, species, and danger. In protecting her, he had become more than a man. He had become a guardian, a beacon of hope in a universe too often cruel and unkind. And even as his body ached and his mind reeled from exhaustion, John smiled. Lyra was alive. She had survived. And he had kept his promise. For him, that was all that mattered. Dawn broke slowly over the forest, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. John sat on a fallen log, exhausted, bruised, and sore, but alive. The hunters were gone, or at least far enough away for the moment. His thoughts were with Lyra, the small alien child who had changed everything in his life. She was somewhere safe, hidden, and alive because of him. He remembered the way she had run into his arms that first night, terrified and alone. Her trust had been fragile, delicate, yet absolute, and he had promised her safety. He had kept that promise, but now as he looked at the sunlight filtering through the trees, he knew their journey was far from over. The universe was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, and Lyra's people and the forces hunting them were still out there. Suddenly, a faint shimmer appeared in the distance. John squinted, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Then he saw it clearly, a small, glowing craft descending from the sky. Lyra. She had returned, or perhaps found allies from her own world. Her tiny form appeared in the opening of the craft, glowing faintly, wings like delicate shards of light shimmering in the morning sun. John's chest tightened. He wanted to run to her, to hold her one last time, to make sure she was safe. Lyra's large eyes met his, full of tears, fear, and joy all at once. She waved, a small, trembling gesture that conveyed everything words could not. John smiled through the ache in his body and the lump in his throat. "You're alive," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thank you." "John, no," he said softly. "I should thank you. You taught me courage. You taught me what it means to care, to fight for someone else. You changed me, Lyra." Her small hand reached out as if she wanted to touch him one last time. He held it gently, feeling the warmth, the life, the fragile beauty of someone who had trusted him completely. The craft began to hum softly, its engines lighting up as if preparing to take her away. John felt a pang of sorrow. He had fought to protect her, and now he had to let her go. But he also knew that she belonged in her world, with her people, where she would be safe. He had given her a chance at life, a chance at freedom, and that was the greatest gift he could offer. "I'll never forget you," John whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "And I know you'll survive. You'll live and you'll be free." Lyra's eyes glistened with tears. "I never forget you too, always in heart." Then, with a soft glow, she stepped into the craft. The engines roared gently, and the craft lifted into the sky, carrying her away from the forest, from him, and into the unknown. John watched until the shimmer disappeared into the horizon. A silence fell over the forest, heavy yet peaceful. He realized that he would never see her again, yet he felt a warmth inside, a knowledge that he had made a difference. One small life, fragile and innocent, had survived because of humanity, because of him. He sat for a long time thinking of Lyra, of her courage, her trust, her innocence. The universe was vast and often cruel, but he understood something profound. The greatest strength of humanity was not in weapons, power, or domination. It was in empathy, in courage, in the choice to protect the innocent even when it was dangerous, even when it seemed impossible. As the sun rose higher, John stood, brushing the dirt from his clothes. He felt exhausted yet alive in a way he had never known before. He had faced fear, danger, and the unknown, and he had chosen to stand for something greater than himself. And that, he realized, was what made humans remarkable. He walked back toward his small house at the edge of the forest, carrying the quiet pride and warmth of a heart that had protected life, that had made a difference, that had stood for hope. And somewhere across the stars, a small alien child would live, glowing with life, carrying the memory of a human who had believed in her. John smiled, whispering to the wind, "Be safe, Lyra, always." And with that, the forest seemed to breathe with him, the sunlight dancing through the trees like a promise. That courage, empathy, and love could shine even in the darkest corners of the universe. Humanity, he realized, had made its mark not through fear, but through the strength to care.